407 poops ago, I replaced the factory chuck on this Milwaukee with a keyed chuck. I think this was the factory chuck anyway. I may have thrown it away. But if it's not, close enough to act as a stand-in. The factory chuck was terrible, would slip easily on larger diameters. And this keyed chuck is what I had on hand. Although it's been working absolutely fine, it is a bit of an inconvenience. Full disclosure, I still do zip this open and shut like it were keyless, and only get the key out if something slips. But it's 2019, and I've got a reputation to uphold. So in a not so recent Amazon order, I picked up one of these, a Superior Electric boneless chuck, keyless chuck. Came in at just under 40 bucks. It's an ST13B, just in case that'd keep anyone up at night. Of all the keyless chucks on Amazon, I picked this one for one very important reason. It's got a red stripe that matches the color of the drill body. I've actually had this chuck installed for a couple of weeks now. I do have some time on it. I only swapped back to the keyed chuck for cinematic reasons. And after 2 weeks, what do I have to say about it? Not a lot, really. So far it works, no complaints. It does feel like I went through a lot of trouble to get to the drill that this should have been right out of the box. I do think it looks a little bit weird, a little off. The proportions aren't quite right. Not the chuck in and of itself, but the whole ensemble here. I don't know, it has that strange DeWalt look, if anybody knows what I'm talking about. It's kind of dead in the eyes. As the kids are so fond of saying these days, I dropped some mad loot on a new Noga indicator stand. I was going to talk about this, then I wasn't, then I was, then I wasn't. Then I used it for the intro, so here we are, for continuity's sake. As there isn't much to talk about, but it is a welcomed addition. These are expensive, well, compared to the cheap import ones. And I believe this is the smallest one they make. But having it here in hand, it really is a jewel, a gem, probably even a dove. The feel, fit, and finish is just perfect. It exudes quality. This is the NF6 something, something, something. I'll put it on the screen. If anyone knows what an indicator stand is for, please raise your... Correct. Indicator stands are for holding indicators. This one happens to have a magnetic base that can be turned on and off, but they come in different flavors. Don't know how many Noga makes, but you can get stands without the magnet, for use on a surface plate, for example. But these with magnets I think are meant to be used primarily on machine tools. Don't get the old suction cup ones, they're not that good. These you can stick to your lathe, your mill, the hood of your car to measure windshield wiper runout. Sky's the limit. That and your indicator travel, of course. Through the arm, there's a system of little rods and cams and ball ends at all the joints that you can unlock, put it in the position you like, and lock it in place. On top of being silky smooth and great tasting, they're absolutely rock solid when locked. The magnet is very strong for its size, and it has a nice little fine adjust to help you really land the indicator where you need it. Compare that to some of my others. I've got a, I don't know, magic snake kind, which is absolute rubbish. It only really locks in a very small range, and it's not that stable when it is locked. Maybe there are better quality name brand ones, but this one stinks. The only reason I haven't smashed it with a hammer and thrown it in the trash is the thought of using it for something else. Maybe to hold my cigars for hands-free smoking, that or to position a welding lens for filming purposes. Not sure which one yet. I've got a small Noga knockoff. I'm calling it a knockoff, but Noga maybe didn't invent these. The mechanism is similar, probably identical, but this one is a little crunchy. I have to wrestle with it a little bit, which isn't necessarily the end of the world, but it has no fine adjust and the magnet is only so-so. Once set up, I usually have to tap the arm a bit to get the indicator set to where I'd like it. Then there are these, I don't know, fixed beam style. Maybe you recognize these. They're inexpensive, and once set up, they're usually super solid, but getting them set up can be a pain. The size of the clamps are pretty big. the offset is large. And usually you're trying to get into a very specific position, so you end up flipping these clamps around so the indicator's on the other side perhaps, and it's too low so you can't tighten it because the knob's running into the magnet. So you break it down, probably have to flip one of the two clamps and try for plan B. And what's probably worse than that inconvenience, depending on the quality you buy I guess, these clamps over time tend to disintegrate. The plastic knobs break, the screws strip, it just starts to fall apart. I can't tell you how many drawerfuls I have of stupid broken indicator stand parts. And finally I've got this Tesa, whatever. Great quality, stays in place, strongish magnet for its age. It has lost a little bit of oomph in the 80 years since they made it, and it has a fine adjust. The clamps are nice and compact, so it's a small offset. I don't think I've ever had to flip this one around, but it's a smallish indicator holder, has limited reach. The Noga, despite me having gotten the smallest one, can land the indicator almost twice the distance. And I guess that's it. That thing tucked nice and cozy right in there is a carburetor. It's got one job, to carburate, not to be confused with carbonate. This is one of those rare instances where we want carbureted air and not carbonated air. It takes fuel from the gas tank and air from the world, mixes it in a very specific proportion, and feeds it to the engine. That's all it does, air and gas. I mean, come on, even a peanut butter and jelly sandwich has more ingredients than that. See that little black screw right there with the spring on it? I'd like to make a new one that's easier to get to, something a little more approachable. This screw controls how much of that air-gas cocktail the engine is drinking while it's under no load. The carburetor is mixing the drink, but this controls how much of that drink gets down the engine's throat while the engine is just sitting there, while it's idling. And it has a very complicated scientific name. The idle screw. The spring is just there to keep some tension on the screw so it doesn't move under engine vibration or while you're being a knucklehead with the bike. It's to keep it from moving on its own. Sometimes it is necessary to make small adjustments to the idle setting. I'm sure we're all familiar with the frustrating feeling of having jumped a ramp, flown through some flaming hoops, and wanting to make a change to the idle setting only to discover you have to fumble for a screwdriver before you hit the ground. Now, I'd like to make a new version of the same screw, only something easier to use, something easier to adjust with gloves on perhaps. Now, you can buy easy adjust screws for carburetors, but they cost something crazy like $7 or $8. And as you know, I just bought a Noga stand, so times are rough. This thing happens to be plastic. I think I'm going to make it out of brass. First thing I need to do is identify the threads. Take some dimensions basically. I'm going to make it about an inch longer and give it a large knurled thumb wheel. These are screw checkers. I've got them in inch and metric. If you don't have a set of these, I highly recommend them. They save a ton of time. You can measure your screws with a micrometer or calipers and count the pitch, count the threads. But these things are cheap. They're all different kinds and styles. Just pick the one you like, throw it in your toolbox, and when you need to check a screw, just find the one it fits in. There's a ton of handy information crammed onto one of these things. So much, in fact, I had to knock a couple letters out of checker. The bike is all metric, so I assume this carburetor screw is going to be metric. It's a 5. M5 coarse pitch, 0.8 millimeter. As luck would have it, I don't have any brass this size, just bigger stuff. I have some pieces of bronze, copper, and aluminum. I don't know if it really matters what this is made out of, but bronze it is. If you're a risk taker and you like living life to the fullest, you could single point thread this, but it's so thin it might break. Or deflection on the free end results in a larger thread than it does at the bottom. I mean, it's certainly doable. Take some precautions. I just want to get through this, so I've got a die in my die holder. I'm using my tailstock as support just to keep the die square to the axis of the part. Moving along by feel, I'm using plenty of oil. I don't have a die follower or spring-loaded anything. I'm just using a Morse taper sleeve. Resist the urge to remove dies under power feed. 9 out of 10 times it would work just fine, but there's always that one time you forget to flip the lathe direction. If perchance M5 sounds Greek to you, this is like a number 10 screw, about 3/16 of an inch. The profile on the tip I just brought in with a file. Eyeballed it as close as I could to the original. I was getting a little too close to the chuck with the knurling tool, so I moved the whole piece out, decided to make the extension a little bit longer. Now I'm just going to cut it off and clean it up. That's it there. I hope I'm in frame. I'll have to set that once I fire the bike up. It was a couple of turns out from fully compressed spring. I did drill it out a bit, tried to remove some material, cut the weight down, just to help me get some sick air. Seriously though, that thing is hanging out, I don't know, 1.25 inches. It's like a diving board. These bikes take quite a beating. I don't know, maybe I did make it a little too long. It's super easy to get to though. Shouldn't be a problem with gloves. And the person riding past me could reach over and adjust my idle. Despite my best efforts to slip it past you, quite a few attentive viewers picked up on my new Pyrex TIG cups. Being a longtime expert in jumping the gun, I hereby declare these my new favorite cup. Out of pure curiosity, I had picked up a number 12 Furic, or FUPA. Although it's really nice, it's not really a good fit for me. It uses way too much gas for the stuff I usually do. Though if I ever come across some titanium, I suppose I'll be ready. These number 8s are more my speed. Number 7s, number 8s have been my go-to sizes for just about everything, even when a different size cup might have been better suited to the job. Now, that's not really the right thing to do, but you can play with the flow rates a bit to get a cup to work for what you're doing. Within reason, of course. I got these from Weldmonger. A 4-pack was $40, I think, shipped to my door. He claims they help aging eyes see better, but I've got to be honest with you, they haven't done squat for my nighttime driving. But for welding, I had to bump my helmet up a shade. It's like welding with a road flare. And those of you who've welded with road flares will know exactly what I mean. They also screwed up the camera settings I'd settled on for welding shots, probably by about 3 stops, so there's definitely more light coming off of these. The downside, of course, is that they're glass. In my attempts to be extra careful putting the torch down and picking it back up again, I have managed to drop this cup straight onto my concrete floor 4 or 5 times now. As you can see, it's still in one piece. Either I got really lucky 5 times in a row, or these Pyrex cups are tougher than they look. Since we're talking welding, my third hand also came up. I've made a few of these over the years. I dug up a pair of old rebar ones I have. Nothing fancy, just a U-shaped bend at the back and a 90-degree bend at the front, though this is the one I reach for the most. This one has this weight on it that can slide back and forth. If you slide it towards the back, it puts less weight on the front. And if you slide it towards the front, it puts almost all the weight on your part. But the construction is exactly the same. And you could probably use an old welding glove full of sand instead of getting all fancy with a sliding weight. Does this make it any better or more useful? I mean, in my head it does. Moving it up front puts some additional weight on your part, so if you're working with something bigger that wants to tip over, it helps. And if you're working on small stuff, thin stuff, wireframe, when you heat that up, especially like aluminum, any additional weight could cause your part to move or buckle or who knows what. Like I said, I've had this for quite a few years. It was maybe just me trying to be clever. You could just make 2 or 3 in different sizes. But it came up, so there it is. They also work well as dent pullers and for extracting stuff, like information. I'm sorry, I should demonstrate how these work. Maybe not everyone's run across a third hand before. Say I wanted to weld this Sharpie to my bench top. If I'm TIG welding, I'm going to need probably 2 hands for the torch and for the filler, and this won't stand up on its own. So I can just use the third hand to prop this up. It's magic. Now my hands are free to tack this and weld it up, go on with my day. And I don't have to bother somebody else to come over here and try to hold this straight while they squint, look the other way, and I have to listen to them complaining about wearing gloves or burning their hand or their union guy seeing them.